This poem was written for Walt Whitman in dedication to his 200th birthday this year and part of the Whitman 200 Art and Democracy celebration. I write as the molecules of oxygen rice drinking in the iron dust, coloring the earth's crust. I write as the patterns of the earth write, with the cursive of bands, stripes, ripples, with curbs, ribbons, squirrels, spikes, and cracks. As the eroded salt crust writes in Death Valley, as the strings of rope lava on the Kilauea Big Island, Hawaii, as grooves and channels chisel on the sandstone of a mesa. I write as the sheen before the eyes that writes with a sparrow fluffing in a tree, mind craving order, or being still takes hold, gazing at the pleasure of beauty's indolence. I write as midnight writes over the dark with foliage of glitter, or dancing with the moon, listening to the music of the universe inside, writing in an empty radiance, a stillness where only breath rules. I write as the anarchy of wild flowers with the tips of needlegrass in a meadow without the governance of pruning and weeding, with the blunted spear of wild lupine writes, with a blaze of bluebonnets bowing to the showy goldenrods and wild indigos. As the bees write in spring, waiting for the slow, graceful prelude to the skyward arc of the stem. As sepals write, spreading wide with a blaze of color, inviting the bees to bury their heads in the beauty. As fireflies in summer write, turning glimmer into glow with a rhythm of flashes luring children with jars. As the Mexican monarch butterfly writes, laying eggs of a new generation gathering at the border, dreaming of the soft velvety blossoms of milkweed. As the eel in fall thicken, toughen, swimming up and up and up the Chesapeake, up the rivers, creeks, dams, overland to ponds, to the open waters for the final voyage to the Saragossa Sea. As the crabs write, burrowed deep in the mud of the Chesapeake Bay, in winter, never feeding or moving. As Mother Nature writes, that I will not be deprived the freedom of my domain, Earth. Good evening, my name is Charles Carr, and welcome to Philly Loves Poetry, which is a collaborative program between the Moonstone Art Center of Philadelphia and Philly Chem. The focus of our program is to give our audience a taste of the rich culture of poetry in the city of Philadelphia, and to understand there are over 50 organizations outside of the universities and colleges in the city that sponsor poetry in some way or other throughout the city all year round. There are those that sponsor special poetry events like Moonstone, those that offer poetry workshops for poets of all ages, both poets of the pages, as we say, poets of the stages, as well as poems of all styles. The thing is that on any given day or any given evening in the city of Philadelphia, you can find poetry being read somewhere. So welcome. The theme of tonight's Philly Loves Poetry is new voices of poetry in Philadelphia. And to my right is Krisann Janowitz. Krisann is really the host of this series, which is part of the Moonstone Poetry series. Krisann has always had a passion for poetry, words, elementary school, if you count all the song lyrics about bubblegum. Among others, her poems have been published by Street Cake Magazine, The Avenue, The Z Publishing, along with her chapbook, Homeless, a sampling of poems on home and homelessness, published by Moonstone Press. Krisann is honored to be the host of Moonstone's New Voices. And next to her is Spencer Nitkey. Spencer is a writer and poet living in Philadelphia. His poems and prose have appeared in short editions, the Gateway Review, Critical Read, and more. And Spencer is a recent graduate of our own Temple University and in secondary education. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And next to Spencer is Jennifer Nessel. Jennifer is a 2019 graduate from St. Joseph's University and recently received the Best Short Story Award from our university's literary magazine. Congratulations. Crimson and Gray, and received funding for a novella entitled The Cage, through which she explored trauma and storytelling in the age of the Me Too movement. Jennifer is currently a volunteer reader for the online creative nonfiction magazine Hippocampus and an assistant editor for the Pharmacy Times. So welcome.
Yeah.
And last but not least is Matilda Bray. Matilda offers a superbly unconventional, resonant voice among new and emerging poets. Matilda's search for meaning and beauty questions the perfectly unpredictable nature of what it means to be coming of age living in America today. Matilda's, and this is a quote, Matilda's ability to focus on one or two unifying images and mine them metaphorically is extraordinary. Matilda is a brave and gifted poet. And this is a quote from Joanne Leva, founder and executive director of the Montgomery Poet Laureate Program. So welcome to you all. Great to have you. It's great to have new voices in poetry in Philadelphia, that we know there's a whole new generation of poets that are coming. So Krisann, I want to start with you. Where did this all start? The idea of it, how did it grow? Where do you have these readings? Where do you recruit people from?
Sure. Yeah, so it actually started with Larry, the founder of Moonstone, and a few of his interns. And they just came up with this idea, and I kind of was immediately very interested in it. And then after the first reading or so, I just transitioned into becoming the host of New Voices. Mm-hmm. And it's been really great. As for, what was your?
Well, where do you see it going?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so far we've had 8 readings, and we went through a couple different locations, and I feel like right now we have a location that's just right at Shakespeare & Co. So we're hoping to continue having New Voices readings the third Sundays of each month at Shakespeare & Co. 2 p.m. And we just love this community that we've helped cultivate. Mm-hmm. As we know, there are so many talented younger poets in the city of Philadelphia and the surrounding areas, mm-hmm. But they don't always get that chance to show off their work. And that's what I'm really passionate about, because Moonstone found me at a younger age, and I want others to get their opportunities. And our slogan is a voice for everyone, and we truly believe that.
Okay, Shakespeare and Company is between 16th and 17th on Walnut Street, correct? Yep. Mm-hmm. And what time on the third Sunday are these readings?
2 p.m.
2 p.m. Mm-hmm. Is it an hour reading, 2-hour reading?
It usually runs about 2 hours.
Okay.
We typically have 3 poets featured, and then we have an open mic. And that's actually how I found a lot of our poets, mm-hmm. was through, let's say Jenny brings a friend, and then they read at the open mic, and I'm like, well, your friend's also very talented. I want to feature them too. So that's how a lot of that kind of comes about.
And how have you gone about, what are the medium that you use to promote this, to attract more, other than networking, new voices to the forum?
I mean, I think social media plays a big aspect in this day. We're on Instagram and Facebook, and Facebook events really attract a lot of people, and I think that's how a lot of people hear about these things.
That's great.
Mm-hmm.
So how many poets have participated in this series? Do you have an idea?
I mean, if you count our book lunch, we had probably 30 or more so far, yeah.
Well, can you talk about that?
Sure. Yeah.
The title of that is?
Philadelphia's Emerging Poets.
Okay.
So this is our New Voices, and at this launch is also how we found more people, because we just had these calls for submissions. Poets under 25 were submitting their pieces to us, and then when they came to premiere their work and get their free copy, that's how we discovered a lot of them, like Spencer, for example. Mm-hmm. And so that was also a really great time.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
wonderful. So, when is the next reading?
Our next reading is August 18th, so
August
it's coming
18th.
out.
Okay, so
Yep.
if our audience wants to come out and see
Mm-hmm.
it, it's really a great place,
Yeah.
Shakespeare and Company
Yeah, it's
place,
great.
because you can come there. Of course, it's there are books there you can browse, but also you can get a cup of coffee, sit and relax, read books, and of course, have a cup of coffee and listen to these great young poets the third Sunday of the month. So, turning to you, Spencer, what brought you into poetry? Have you been like, this is a lifelong thing with you, or is this something that evolved?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I've been writing poetry kind of forever, for as long as I can remember. I think originally I was really interested in like music and songwriting, so I think my earliest journals are just full of song lyrics. And then especially in probably middle school, it became sort of a really vital way to sort of express and understand myself as a person, as I was going through a lot of changes that I think everyone goes through in those years especially. But I kind of have always been a writer. I believe pretty strongly in the power of language and the importance of writing and articulating and listening. And I think writing is a really excellent medium for listening in a way that sometimes, I mean, when I read words, I feel sometimes like it's a deeper level of understanding and listening than even sometimes like face-to-face verbal communication, which is sort of why I've always been really drawn, I guess, to write myself. Yeah, I guess I've just been doing it forever.
So you said that in middle school it sounds like you got a little more serious. Was there a medium for that? In other words, where there's a group, was there a teacher, was there a class that helped to, you know, to move you along with this and recognize your creativity?
It's gonna sound very, I guess, very like a millennial thing to say, but Tumblr was a pretty big writing community at the time, which was like an online blogging platform. And so for the first time, it was both the safety of anonymity because it's the internet, but also a level of feeling like people are connecting with and communicating with me, which was pretty liberating for an early writer who wasn't very confident or certain about what they were doing, but just wanted to say things. So yeah, that was probably the first like writing communities I found were those online spaces, interestingly enough. And then later in high school, I found more sort of spoken word communities, which were good, and I really enjoyed that. I did a lot of theater in high school too, and so that kind of joined together the more stage stuff with the writing stuff I was doing in an interesting way. Yeah, hopefully
so
that answers that question.
would you describe yourself as a spoken word poet, or are you a poet on the page too, and the stage, both?
I mean, now I've sort of moved away from the stage, I guess. I find myself just writing things that feel more like they belong on the page than the breath, I guess. It was, I don't know, and I think that line's kind of blurry, so it's hard for me to say, but I haven't really done anything related to spoken word in a long time, so I guess I'm a page poet now.
So if I would ask you, where do your poems come from? And what is your discipline? I mean, do you write every day? Do you have a specific time that you dedicate to writing your poems, or it's just when you feel the impulse that you begin to write?
A lot of the times it's when I feel an impulse, I guess I would say. I tend to write sort of more narrative poems, so I like stories, and I think a lot of this stuff I write is kind of in a fairy tale, folklore-y kind of realm. So I sort of imagine a lot of what I'm doing as existing inside of that literary tradition, as well as sort of like the poetic tradition. But in terms of discipline, I mean, I just have, when I can, because being in college and getting a master's degree was a pretty busy process. So it's been on the 15 minutes before dinner that I write some things in the notes on my phone, or when I'm on the train, I have my notebook writing some things there. And then sometimes when I have I feel like I do that for like a week or two, and then a bunch of energy gets built up, and then I have to spend like an hour and a half or 3 hours or 5 hours on a Saturday just writing for a long period of time. So I guess that means I'm not super disciplined, but hopefully that answers that question.
So you were talking about, you write about myth, or where is your concern of your voice and your direction of your poetry, would you say, right now?
Yeah, I mean, I guess sort of, it's such a, myth and story and narrative combined with sort of the lyricism I've always loved of poetry is sort of where the ideal of what I want my work to reach is, and sort of finding ways to reimagine myth or reimagine reimagine fairy tales, reimagine religious symbols that sort of were important to me when I was younger. I just think that stories in particular, and particularly those like magically tinged stories tend to be really sort of important, both like culturally and like in my own personal development. So expressing things via those stories, expressing things that feel like important and pressing in my own emotional life, and that are hard to explain and describe and grapple with, find their home in that sort of form, I guess.
So Jen, turning to you, I would ask the same set of questions. I mean, how did you come to poetry? I see that you're not only a poet, but you write fiction as well.
Yes, it's hard to follow up from Spencer, but I'll try. I sort of had a similar journey. I started writing poetry very young, probably around when I was like 9 or 10. But I didn't tell anyone. It was kind of like my own little secret, and I grew up playing instruments and like singing. So it became a medium that I can express my emotions and my mental kind of state through words instead of just through music. And somewhere around that time I started writing stories. I can't have a definitive point of when I started, but it was a way for me. I grew up loving stories. I remember vividly sitting my father down and just telling him for hours and hours the kind of stories that I was reading. And he very patiently sat through, and as I would explain all these things. So somewhere around that time, I decided I'm going to start writing my own. So what I would do is I would write a poem, get it down and print it out, and then I'd go to him and I'd say, this is all my poetry, and I'd read it for him. And so I guess I'm a little different in the sense that I didn't really have a writing community when I was younger. It was more of a way, especially poetry, it was very intimate for me. I didn't show a lot of people except for my dad. But somewhere around high school, I remember I started writing more and more fiction. And with the goal one day of having it, or one day getting published. But it was kind of weird because I would have different voices, one with poetry and one with fiction, and they very, very little overlapped. My poetry was very lyrical. It was very, very much like spoken word, where the words kind of mimicked, or like the sound choices kind of mimicked each other. But then, I guess toward college, I was very regimented. So I would write in the morning, and then I would begin my day, and sometimes, at least with fiction, I was more regimented than I was with poetry. Poetry, it would just be a little nibble at the back of my mind of what is the sound that those words are making, and how can I kind of sort of transition that to something that's going on. So that's sort of been my journey. Now I write fiction whenever I can. I don't eat lunch anymore. I just, with my 9-to-5 job, I spend lunch and I write fiction, and then I go home and then I write poetry and fiction, and that's my life. I can't really get away with it.
And I overheard in the conversation before we went on air that you're applying for a Master's of Fine Arts.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes. I'm right in the beginning of it, so we'll see what happens.
Well, good luck.
Thank you.
The other thing is, where would you say what is the concentration of your poetry? Well, I ask people, well, are you concerned about nature? Are you concerned about the world? Is there everything that's happening politically leaking into your poems, or is it more your personal experience in life?
Yeah, so I remember actually answering this with Krisann. You asked this before. When Krisann first found me at St. Joseph's University, she asked, like, what are your poems about? And it prompted me to think. I write a lot about relationships, but not just a romantic relationship, because I think that doesn't necessarily encompass the dynamics of a person. It's your relationship with your family, your relationship with your community, and your relationship with yourself. And I think it's very difficult to write about relationships if you are living in a vacuum. You know, we're all affected by like politics and religion and the environment. These are things that we're coming to contact every day. And so I believe that I'm a pretty empathetic person. So if, you know, there's something on the news or there's something that, you know, maybe affects my family, I'm going to gravitate toward it a little bit more. So the Cage was inspired by my own family's journey with sexual assault and trauma and, you know, my own experience as a woman in a modern age. And I think it's very difficult to, especially with poetry, when you have such an intimate setting with a writer and a reader. You know, you're sharing something with someone, so it's, you know, you kind of have to look into your humanity, but also look into theirs.
Are there particular poets or you know, writers that you have really been attracted to, and if you were asked, have they had an influence on your poetry?
Yes. So
could you share that with us?
Yeah, I grew up reading a lot of British literature, and so Jane Austen was my favorite writer for a very long time. And then I also enjoyed Walt Whitman, and I'm glad you brought him up because I really enjoy his writing. But somewhere around my sophomore year of college, I had a very intuitive professor who started sharing with me more writers of color, and I completely gravitated toward them. So unfortunately, we lost Toni Morrison today, and rest in peace. But I gravitated toward her, Alice Walker, Maya Angelou. You know. Lots of women writers, especially. I've been trying to challenge myself and read writers who are currently living and currently writing. So I've been reading, there's Yael Ghazi. She just wrote Homegoing, and that's a beautiful novel about kind of the imprint of slavery on modern day America. And there's lots of stories. Oh my gosh, I could talk forever. But there's, I think if I was to give any you know, advice on reading and writing, there is no shortage of writers, and there are no shortage of poets. And whatever type of poetry you're writing, you love to read. There are dozens, if not hundreds, of people who, you know. So it's
that's great. Matilda, I would ask you the same questions, and you're holding in your hand your book of poems. Can you hold it up so we can see it? And what's the name on the title of the?
Under the Moon is My Son.
And when was that published?
This summer, actually. So pretty
this
recently.
Summer?
Yeah.
Oh wow. And
Last summer.
Last summer. So last summer you were 13, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And who published that?
What?
Who published your book?
I did it through Indiegogo, so like it was kind of like self-published.
Okay. And who did that wonderful design on the front?
My
Is that
uncle.
Your uncle?
Yeah.
Okay, that's beautiful. So, obviously, you know, 13 even before, your attachment and your involvement with poetry was a very young age. And when did that all come about? And you know, how have you feel you have evolved as a poet?
I think that it was like around first grade. I had like written a few poems, and then I showed one to my first grade teacher, and then she told me to like try out to see if it would be published in the school's newspaper, and I actually got published in like for my grades category. So that kind of like jump started me into like writing more poetry and being more confident in myself.
Now that's amazing. That's really amazing. I can't picture myself in first grade, really being captured by poetry yet. So that's absolutely incredible, and congratulations to you. Where would you say the focus of your writing is? What really concerns you? Where do your poems come from?
I think so. I'm a vegetarian, and I'm like a vegetarian because I don't really like animals being killed. So I gravitated like a lot towards that category, and then also like nature I go to because I just love going out in nature and just seeing things that inspire me. So,
Tell us about that nature. I mean, you live out in Bucks County, correct? Okay. Tell us about that nature. Where do you go? What's your environment up there that really captures you?
I think I like flowers, and I also like talking about like the sights that I see. So like smells and all of that. So like some of my poems are about like pies, like blueberry pies and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Because I like.
I hope you read that one poem. I did read a poem that you had about your vegetarian focus. I thought some other people read it too. They thought it was fascinating. It was kind of really like a poem for us vegetarians. Great.
Yeah.
So wonderful. So I mean, let's start, and we want to hear. You know, it's nice to talk about poetry, talk around poetry. The greatest thing here is to listen to you read your poems. So I'll start out with you, Spencer. And,
Okay, great.
and you can talk about this
sure.
and talk about, you know.
Yeah. So this is I was going to say this is a fairly long poem, but most of my poems tend to be fairly long.
That's all right.
I've been described as a maximalist before, so I wasn't sure if that was a pejorative statement or not. But this is a poem called "God is a Woman and My Mother, She's a Witch," and the sort of ambiguous nature of that title is a little intentional. And I guess I'll just dive into it and I can talk a little bit more about it afterwards. God is a woman and my mother. She's a witch. I've been told there are two people who created me. One is infinite. The other is long-haired and dead. I decide to mourn her with precision. Once I watched an X-Acto knife slice the tip of her finger clean off. Once I came home and our house had walked away. Once my mom died and I wrote her 50,000 letters and burned them all. I dreamed that she is laughing with God in heaven and they are bent over a boiling pot, welcoming all the heretics home with winks. In the church, I watch people break their hearts like eggshells on the pews. They weep on all the Bibles, water stains the programs, their soft sobs muffle the weight of organ music, their tears slick the floor, sending Bibles down the river floating. I eye the preacher skeptically. I eye my father skeptically. They both would have had her burn. They'd have thrown her in lakes with stones tied to her ankles and thanked God. I eye the river of tears and fold my eulogy into a paper ship and send it sailing down and out the church doors into the world. My sisters haven't come and I know why. They are chasing down the chicken-legged home. They are hunting angry old wolves in grandma's clothes through the forest. They are spreading the gospel of mother. It is my job to eulogize. I write her 50,000 letters and burn them, and that should be enough. She reads their ashes like a palm, knows the history of the pages, of the tree, of the earth, its minerals coming up through the roots. She knows of my grief, the history of my blood, of the minerals coming up through my roots. I look up at a misgendered God in the stained glass. The light from outside reflects and shimmers in reds and blues that lay on the church carpet in misshapen rectangles. Amens rise around me, fill the air with ceremony and heft. And now a word from her son. Once a hurricane stopped at our door and my mother made him tea. Once we found bones buried in the backyard and my mother cried and cried for 14 days and 14 nights and said those bones were her mother's and did not explain any more than that. Once I stood at a microphone and looked out at a sea of grief heaving like an ocean, breathing in the slow ancient way of forests and said nothing at all. Instead I laugh. The cackling self-indulgence and love of a coven stretches out from me. It is deep and manifold, voices pealing and multiplying as they flee my throat. The laughter twists and turns, wraps like vines around their ears and chokes them. I laugh because once when I was little, my mother took my hand and told me she would one day drink oolong tea with God. I laugh and laugh until the preacher drags me away, the cachinnation lovelier than any chorus. Thanks.
Do you have more?
More poems?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've got a couple poems from a series I wrote, and they're hagiographies, which is the writing about the lives of saints, one of which was published in the Emerging Poets. But I'm going to read a different one, and this is hagiography number 4. Mary is the goddess of persistence, but we don't believe in pantheons anymore, so we call her a saint. When she was 7, her mother was in a near-fatal car accident, which left her paralyzed and with permanent kidney damage. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, her mom would go to special classes, which were a dialysis treatment center. These tri-weekly sessions lasted 4 hours each. Mary's mom was on the bottom of a long waiting list for a new kidney. Mary took matters into her own small dirt and tear and charcoal and candy and fingerprint-stained hands. She asked her dad for a large poster board, which he brought her. She wrote in large looping letters, "Kidney needed, please call," and her home phone number beneath it, and nailed it to a tree in front of her house so that anyone driving could see it and call. She heard her parents quietly arguing about it in their bedroom. She refused to let them take it down. She had seen eco-protesters chain themselves to trees on the news and was, she insisted, willing to do the same. And so the poster stayed up, confusing, saddening, and annoying passersby and neighbors. At night, Mary would not sleep. She would stare out of her window and count the passing headlights, tallying the cars, the endless litany of strangers. She imagined their faces, snowmen faces, driving by as their veins pumped nitrous oxide through their insides, but she never grew resentful. Instead, she played surgeon. She took a knife from her father's workshop and a packet of seeds her mother had planned on planting before the accident in gasoline. She used the passing headlights as fluorescence and opened up her small chest. The sound of her ribs cracking should have woken her parents, but didn't because they were tired and because she had shoved sheets into the cracks around her door to muffle the sound. She thought of the strangers' frozen over faces and felt where in her heart, open, bleeding, and gasping, there was hate. She found an icicle running through her chest. She took a pocket knife out of her drawer and plunged it through her heart where the ice was. Yes, it hurt, but the hate was gone. She took her open chest and threw a handful of seeds into its bleeding jaw. She watered the seeds with gasoline and felt as the tangled roots coming up through the atria. She dropped a lit match and set her heart on fire. The flowers bloomed into this ventricular furnace, and she saw their blossoming heads peek up through the flames as she shut her chest. In the morning, her parents saw the blood and cried. Mary carried her pierced and burning heart forever. She kindled its flame and tended its garden, and yes, it always hurt. She persisted and ascended like an ancient hero to the heavens where she and her flaming heart were welcomed, where 1,000 stars burn with no self-consciousness at all.
Wow. What brought you to this interest in the life of the saints?
Again, I sort of found myself an atheist in high school at a time in my life where there was a lot of pre-built-in structure in my life, and that sort of realization that I didn't necessarily believe in God or the sort of religion I'd been raised on was a very freeing sensation. And then sort of more recently, as I've gotten older and the sort of built-in structures of my life have faded a little bit, it's been less liberating and a little more scary to find myself without those sort of structures. So in my sort of more recent poetic practice, I guess, I've been interested in thinking about ways of using like stories, and I really like the stories of the saints because they do sort of fall into that very sort of like mythic structure, and almost like I say in the poem, they're kind of pantheonic in a sense, almost like a leftover vestige of some of those more like polytheistic religions. And that's sort of thinking about ways in which saintliness and miracles exist around us more frequently than maybe we see, and learning how to look for beautiful, sacrosanct things in the world is, I guess, sort of why I've been drawn to the lives of saints more recently.
Very interesting. Jen.
Jeez, you keep coming to me after all of that. It's really difficult. All right, okay, so this one is called On a Forgotten Tuesday Afternoon. And I think I kind of wrote it just like in the middle of a work day on my lunch break. So there is no space here, not for the little swallows that bounce between branches, nor the rocking horse waves of the man-made lake that push and pull into one another. The tiny children who dip their toes into the water to pull them out in case of tadpoles aren't aware of a grand scheming sunset in terms of time. There is no space for it. And those hand in hand by the ice cream stand, choosing between vanilla and chocolate, aren't in this place either. They exist in some in-between that has yet to be shown to me. They all hold some secret that they can't quite tell. No, they say, wait your turn. As if the passing tide of sunshine isn't washing over the state of my existence, as if I have time. I sit on my women's blue blazer, worrying about grass stains and tide to go, while the night blends into the day in blues and golds and reds, dipping its toes into the shoreline of sky. In the midst of movement of tadpoles and ice cream lovemaking, I'm lost to a valley of color. There is no space here, though it isn't certainty that begs me to sit and watch it all unfold. It's fear. It's fear of hatred, of violence, of tandem bicycles and mismatched socks, the fear of waking up and forgetting the time of day, the fear that occurs when two atoms collide after a series of decisions that make them want to collide, the fear that there is no space. And if I was a woman that thought about the afterwards of a poem, I might smile. I might take my walk elsewhere, on some other path, and paint a different picture with happier words. But there's not enough space here to breathe it in deeply and contemplate my space. There is no space. I might mark up the ground when I leave my spot, and taking up my coat, I may pause and contemplate the time, but perhaps I may not. Those children will still be there, whether or not I do, wondering about some distant place underneath that water. They will be there long after I walk away, waiting for someone to take their hand, put on their jacket, and take them home. So that's like my fear of a 9-to-5 job. Really hopeful and positive. Just kidding. So that was kind of like my relationship with myself. Am I comfortable sitting alone by a man-made lake, sort of finding my place within everybody else? And this one is about my relationship with my family. And it's sort of written in spoken word. I don't normally do that, but I was watching Sarah Kay, who's a wonderful poet, and I highly suggest her, but she does the same kind of thing. So, my mother rolled her eyes at me. She placed the various form of potatoes, mashed, boiled, stewed, and chopped in front of me. She rolled her eyes and she sat down on the other side of the table. The pounding boiler rapping in the basement found its coils through the veins of the house. Pound, 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 a sound which tortured the very life of the place until, on hands and knees, a moment flew up back into my meal and morphed into a series of yellows and whites that even ambrosia could not have enticed me. My brother smelled of cigarette smoke. It seeped through his shirt and flowed about the steam of the amorphous blobs of starch, and through the smoke I swear I saw a sun of fire in place of the light fixture. One that reminded me of a trip to Gettysburg that I had never taken. Once, perhaps, one I might have forgotten. My father in a minivan, 5 piled children, and a mother with a map in hand, desperate with the fact that she always knew where she was going. My father clenched his fork, obsessed with the placement of the butter and the bread, the gravy and the half-eaten meat that relished in the charcoal smell of cigarette. We sat at the table with the potatoes, which took on a life of their own as the days piled into a van with one another. He had promised me once that better was coming, or had I imagined that?
Do you have more?
I have more on my phone, but I feel bad taking out my phone.
We have a lot of poets now that read from their iPads and their phones.
Okay.
My vision would not allow that.
So I guess this one kind of falls along the lines of relationships, but this one is more in terms of like a romantic relationship. So I don't have a title for it. I think I did at one point, but it's on my phone. So perhaps there was love in the plains of Venice, where the air is sweet with wine, and floating from the soft light of the city into the countryside, music dances on the tips of trees. Or in the marketplaces of Istanbul, where rising from the vivid color of saffron, turmeric, and paprika is the shrill of a blagama and the voices of a million faces passing through narrow streets. Perhaps in Laos, where Buddha lies in golden sleep, dreaming of the vein of the Nam song, which it hums quietly through a bed of lush green forest. But I have never seen those places, and they would look very different if I imagined them through other eyes. Perhaps through the 1,000 years of existence, love is like a skipping rock, which when cared for is carried off quickly, falling into the bed of a river, carried lightly by the tide toward the shore, where it is found again. Never have I known a love sweeter than this, one tasting of black coffee through cherry-stained teeth, searching through stacks of paper, smiling quietly, leaning on the shoulder of someone who is shaking. Love spoken of in the hundreds of jazz crooners I listened to as a child, love whispered of in the heart of Monet's garden, or that which fell quickly as the city grew smaller into the pastel hues of my rearview mirror. Perhaps I've stumbled upon it, perhaps I'll never know it again. There may have been love in those places, but I hold with me the pieces they left behind.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Matilda, you have that wonderful, remarkable book of poems in front of you. You got to share some of this with us.
Okay, so trying to find. Okay, so this one is about gooseberries. I think I pronounced that right. Okay, oranges never seemed to do the trick. They always made pulpy jam, and the pie smelt burnt, and the juice was too sticky. Strawberries were too sour when you picked the wrong ones. The jam was lumpy, and the pie bottoms were always black as coal. The gooseberries were always fresh, and the rain always made them sweeter than ever. The insides always made my tongue feel a spark, and the pie's insides were always lavishly crusted, dribbling with fruity aromas, popping with the water-soaked gooseberries, warm with the dollop of cream. Try as I might, I could never make morning come soon enough, but I was always the first out of bed, pulling a loose-fitted shirt over my head, stretching 2 tight shorts over my cold legs, grabbing a couple empty peach or corn cans, and then out the door, fast as a jackrabbit, over the first hill, until you reach a long string of trees, and crawling to the top, you can see clusters of gooseberries, ripe and ready to pick, and after your first crisp bite, your hands keep reaching down for more.
Share more.
Okay.
You got a book there.
Okay. So this one is to see the same moon. A bit beyond the skyless water of the pond, dark and black, a moon silhouette on the water, right over you now, and you can almost touch it. Feel the moon's powdery dust press against your palm. Its light, the silvery glow, peeks through your window. It makes your dress ghostly, your big leafy rubber tree a statue. Your eyes search to find an object that is itself, not changed by the moon's light, not changed by the mysterious shadows. Then you look again at the moon, falling between 2 trees. Maybe your friend in England can see the moon from her bedroom. You feel somehow connected. If both your eyes are gazing up to see the orb in the sky, in a sense, you can see your friend, separated through miles, connected by the moon. So that was that one.
How about the poem about the vegetarian?
Oh, yep.
You got to
Okay.
read that.
Yep. Okay. So is it called No Proper Burial? Is that the one?
No, it's something about a point of view, where you are you with your point of view.
I'm not. I'll try and find out. Okay.
Yeah, it's really your manifesto that you're a vegetarian and you.
Okay. Yep. Was it You Can't Sell Me on Celery?
Yeah. Okay.
Was it that one?
Yeah, that was one of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. The celery that I long ceased to look at stared right back at me. I creased out all of its bumps and twisted it into the shape of a green Twizzler. It did not improve its flavor and texture. Before the flesh of it plowed deeper into my gums, I spat it out. I would still have to floss. So that one. And should I read it?
Oh,
Okay.
we got time.
Okay.
Now, no, let me stop you there. I mean, one thing I wanted to ask you, you're going into high school this year?
8th grade.
8th grade, and where, 8th grade? What school are you going to?
New Hope Solberry.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
And so here you are, 14 years old, a poet. What have been the other poets that you have been drawn to?
I think I really liked Robert Frost from a young age. I liked all of his poems, and we had to review a lot of his poems for school for some of their projects. And then Maya Angelou, I like her as well a lot.
I like her too.
Yeah. Thanks.
Read on.
Okay. So this is one about it's called No Proper Burial. I just crunch. The beautiful white fluff with a single curl at the end stains red. Bah, all boxed up in their separate pens. Animals look at the lifeless body, their eyes transfixed on the thing some may have called family. 2. Blood drips to the ground as someone slowly cuts up the creature. All the others watch the lamb's life deformed. No proper burial. The chunks of flesh are then cooked, and even then, it is still flesh, still animal. Cooking doesn't change whether animal is animal. People say meat to forget what it actually is. 3. What if your family was separated into different pens, and you had to watch as a knife sliced right through them? They are dying, on a table, and you didn't even get to say goodbye. 4. Your lamb tears swiftly seeping into your fur. You bat loudly, struggle with the change, forcing you to the ground. Then someone unclasps you, gathers you up, and drops you onto a table. The sharp, smooth blade raises into the air. Your family's remains will soon touch you. Against your reddened fur, your eyes go black.
Pass your book over, because there is a poem there. I don't think it's the one that I read was the correct one. I'll find it.
And she's also going to be one of our featured poets for August 18th, so she'll
Okay.
save some for then.
Okay. You just hold with me, and I'm sure I'll find it.
Thank you.
Yes. So impressed by all of you.
Oh, thank you. We're all your little pupils. I'm glad that we can, I'm glad we can
weird.
make you part of
Let me look at the index here. I know.
I'm glad you have an index.
I know I
with
read this poem.
Yeah.
I remember a line in it was like to never taste the slaughtered kill. That was a line in it. So,
Oh, how I identify.
oh, okay. Oh, okay.
We found the poem.
Okay, yay. Wait, so that is number 13. Okay. To never eat the slaughtered kill, to never eat the lamb, to never eat the pig which was pulled from its home, to not eat what some say is savory, and push my plate away, to the killed animals that people crave on many holidays. Thanksgiving is turkey, Christmas is pig, and Sunday is bacon and more. But no thanks, I'll stick to veggies instead of being a carnivore.
Very good, very good.
Thank
Have another one you can read?
Oh.
We have time? Let me see this.
Okay, so this is called Great Grandpa Come Back, and it's for my great grandpa Sydney. I sit under a hemlock, braiding daisies together, linking them around my wrists and around my neck. Not then did I understand what the coffin being lowered meant. Not then did I see the faces of those who looked lost or had lost something special. But now, as I sit and write, yes, I do understand. And now I see why those who looked lost were crying. And now did I see why they were dressed in black. The power of nature holds truths beyond words, and those truths are told.
Wonderful. So if one wanted to get a copy of your book, how would we do that?
There's, you can get it on Amazon.
You can get it on
Yes.
Amazon. Okay, great.
Yeah,
And would you give us the title of the book again?
yes. Under the Moon is My Son.
Okay, that's great. So we still have time, and I see, I see this wonderful collection of poems. So I guess I would ask Krisann, why don't you pick out a couple that come to mind?
Okay.
They're all very good.
Yes, they are.
But share with us, some of these other voices that.
Sure. Yeah. While I'm looking, one thing that I really love about Moonstone New Voices is that we really are a community. So even though I haven't even met all of these people, I still feel connected to them. It's fun. Alrighty. Making sure there's no curse words because I know we can't do that here. This is a poet that we featured her a couple of times actually. Her name is Sarah Dramack, and this is called self-sabotage. My friend said it's self-sabotage, the way we only love the worst. Stare at our hands and think of flaws, and drink until our bodies hurt. It's true we love only the worst. Surround ourselves with angry men who drink until their bodies hurt. We deal until they say it ends, surrounded by such angry men. Our lovers, friends, and roommates too. We deal, and then when it ends, we cry and say, "Girl, I told you." Our fathers, teachers, preachers too, ignore our heart's appetites. We cry and say, "Girl, I told you." They are the reason why at night we stare at hands and think of flaws. This is our self-sabotage. It's a very powerful one.
Did you write one in there? Did you write a poem in there? You could
Yeah,
probably
there is a
read it.
poem in there. I just passed it.
Yep.
Oh.
Do you want to read Spencer's?
Yeah.
Do you have yours on there?
I mean, I have. Do you want to read it?
Why don't you read it? I
You should
just
read your
passed
own
it. I mean,
poem. Yep, here you go.
Okay. This is another hagiography. Hagiography 2. Astor was born in a small suburb outside of San Francisco. She fell in love with the fog, roving packs of dogs, sniffing the skyline with tremendous wet noses, diving through trees until the whole world became their dichroic bellies, before she ever fell in love with anyone at all except maybe her mother, but that is a different kind of love. She's the saint of dozing off in your chair and not dreaming of anything, but most importantly, she is the saint of dust flecks illuminated by a setting sun as it passes in front of your curtain-drawn windows. She does not know she is a saint, but she is, and when she dies, the dust mites will weep and descend in microscopic force onto her tombstone, and one would be amazed at how dusty her grave is. And they would take a nap in the cool, damp grass of her funeral plot. They would not understand why, but they would sleep, and the dust would fall on them too.
Very nice.
Thank you.
Do you have something in there, Jen? So,
No, I
Okay.
didn't get to put mine in there. Yeah.
let me look it over. I
Okay.
might see something that I like. We still have some time left.
And Spencer will also be reading for our September 15th one, so I'm very excited for that.
Me too, thank you.
Yeah, don't read all of yours here.
Okay.
Yeah, same thing applies.
So this is called Dreamlike by Sophie Ola, age 16. She attends Friend Select School. I write about rose gardens and how the thorns are such like you, how the petals fall softly like your head on my shoulder, and how the fragrance is as sweet as your smile on a Saturday morning. But I have never held a rose just like I have never held you. I write about the sky and how the setting shades compare to the blush on your cheeks, and the rising colors feel like you have forever loved me, but the stars outside my window have never been surrounded by the pinks and purples that I lovingly write about. I love you with every bit of my imagination because the world I live in is too boring to compare to someone as magnificent as you. Very sweet. We still have time.
Can I read one?
Sure.
So this is another very young poet, and we will hopefully be featuring him in October. So he's 14 years old, Franklin Learning Center. It's called A Black Hole.
What is his name?
Mevis Melson Metellus. All right. Every time I fall in the same hole, every time I burn myself in the fire that I set, but this time was inevitable, because I cannot stop myself from loving someone. I loved her so much, even more than myself. I don't know where this love come from. I don't know where it's going. I don't know why I love you. I was your friend for a long time. I was the one who had your back. I always picked up your slack, and that's the fact. I wanted to be more than a friend, more than your cup of tea. I wanted to be your coffee. Because I guess that what I wanted was never going to happen. I was like a fat cat crying for milk, the cat that you kicked like a soccer ball. I wanted to hear yes, to be the best, but you said no. my heart exploded like a supernova. A black hole was born, and it swallowed my feelings. It imprisoned me in my thoughts. I did not recover, because the black hole swallowed even the brightest light. Even the brightest light could not escape. The door of my heart closed until somebody knocked it, because I won't knock anybody's door anymore.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, 14.
Could you share another poem with us before we
Okay.
leave?
Sure. Okay. So this is called Lies. The pain that cuts the unwritten line, which isn't seen or heard, unsheathes the anger from the soul, a bitter clawing bird. The line which you must not cross, that tells the foreigner to abide to the written rules, the written ways, to never tell a lie. Twisted to fit the ups and downs of how you live your life, the words fly out but never fly in. You can't relive this horrid sin. So please, before you decide to tell a lie, consider what could befall, because once the lie is told, time after is others' default.
And another?
We
You've been
need to
reading the
save
whole
some.
book before we get out of here.
Okay.
August 18th.
Okay, so this is called a life cycle. Take immortality, the sharp edges that cut the diamond, that builds the ring that fits the finger. Take immortality, to be the baby wrapped in layers of blankets in winter, that takes the child who enters school and puts on a mask of bravery, that takes the car, be it blue or black or red or white, that takes the wintry winds that blow off the blankets from when you were a baby, that takes the job that pays the bills, the child that lives the day on the edge and always seems to fall, but never does.
Wonderful. Well, I want to thank all of you for coming. Krisann, for bringing these wonderful young poets to us, and being the host of this great series, and Spencer and Jen and Matilda. Good luck, and keep going. Understand that Moonstone is really a great platform for poets of all ages and all stages and all voices. And I say that to our viewers. It's not magic that produces these shows, and not magic that produces all these series that Moonstone runs. Consider that in a year, we have over 90 poetry readings throughout the year. And we are surely to have one every Wednesday night at Fergie's Pub. And there are different hosts that host those. I say that because we need your support. We need your support to do all the things that we do, the publishing of these wonderful chapbooks, anthologies, etc. And if you go to our website, moonstoneartscenter.org, you can not only find out about events like this, but you can find a way you can contribute to continue the support for the Moonstone Arts Center and all that is represented. So I want you to promise that we're going to do another show, and you're going to bring some more of your young poets in the future, and we can do another show like this. I think this was really terrific. I think it was all about, is introducing these new voices to our viewers, and it was really great. You were all fantastic, and I thank you for coming.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
I promise.